little stuff at the end, once I throw that out. 895 pages of real stuff. It's everything you ever want to know and stuff you don't want to know. But DSM-5 classifies a lot of depressive disorders, and we're not looking at all of them, but we're going to look at 3. We're going to look at major depressive disorder, the most common one that you deal with, persistent depressive disorder to distinguish those two, and then premenstrual depressive disorder, because these are all things you need to kind of recognize as a primary care provider. They're things that might show up. Once it gets kind of squirrely beyond that diagnostically, then we'll be going to a psychiatrist anyway. Okay, some facts about depression. It's very commonly encountered. It's one of the more commonly encountered disorders. It is very often underdiagnosed and very often undertreated. So you remember when I showed you the stats on treatment of depression, there was quite a few % of people who weren't treated, weren't accessing services, and not being treated. High prevalence of affective disorders. That's not only affective disorders, are mood disorders. So depression, anxiety, and those types of things are affective. You'll see those. So some facts. Fourth most prevalent health problem, surprise, pretty common. It costs 30 to 50 billion in lost productivity, in direct and direct medical costs. So what you don't do at work plus what it costs to treat you. People who are depressed miss twice as much work because of illness. Okay, and health service costs are 50 to 100% greater for depressed patients due to higher medical utilization, not by specialty mental health care. So when you have depression and you have comorbidities like heart disease, diabetes, they cost more. And part of it is because when you don't treat depression, remember we talked about this in coping with chronic diseases, and it shows up a lot. When you are depressed, you don't have the mental energy and the fortitude to hold together a treatment plan. And you know, in diabetes as an example, there are many things you have to remember to do, and you have to do on a fairly regular schedule. When you have a mental disorder that is untreated and that takes away force of will, concentration, focus, and mental energy, you're not going to do as well. So therefore, you're going to have more complications and chronicity, and it shows up in how much the cost is 50 to 100% greater in the depressed patient, and not because of mental health care. It's because of the consequences of the untreated disease on the other diseases that they have. So it's an important one to look at, and honestly, it is often overlooked. The lifetime incidence of MDD, major depressive disorder, in women is 20% and in men 12%. So it is true that women have it more often than men. Morbidity and mortality figures are kind of stark for this. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in adolescents after accidents, and it represents 10 to 30% of death in 20 to 35-year-olds, so that's a fairly high amount. And tomorrow when we have the lady come to us and talk to us about suicide, you'll get more details about what it is. It's kind of one of those things you know about, but you kind of don't talk about, and we don't pay as much attention to it probably as we should, but it's a reality. Major depressive disorder plays a role in 50 to 75% of all suicides. So given that it's a big cause of death in adolescents, and that over half to 3/4 of those who are associated with depression, it would be something we should pay attention to. It contributes to higher mortality and morbidity in the context of medical illnesses such as post-MI, as I said just a minute ago. And successful treatment of major depressive disorder improves medical and surgical outcomes. It's been proven that if you treat depression, you'll have a better medical outcome, you'll have a better surgical outcome. So when the mind is healthy and healed and capable of cooperating with physical health, you'll do better. Some demographics of depression. If you look at non-Hispanic black patients, versus that they are 40% less likely than non-Hispanic whites to have major depressive disorder. It's more common in Caucasian people to a large extent. Women, 70% more likely than men to have it during their lifetime. And in the average age of onset is about 32 years old. Incidence increases with advancing age. You see it more as people get older. And the rates in men and women are highest in those aged 25 to 44. Okay. Left untreated, depression can destroy the person's social, physical, and mental well-being and place an enormous burden on society. To say the least of how it affects the families, it's certainly socially in the family, it's a huge negative within proper family functioning, and then in the greater world as well. Okay, so how does it come about? I will tell you, there's not lots and lots about pathophysiology that we know to an extreme degree about a lot of mental illnesses, but we know a pretty good bit about depression, but still not enough. We still don't know exactly why it happens, and it's likely not a single disease. It's likely a lot of different things going wrong that end up manifesting the same way as depression. Very much like diabetes, it can break down to so many different levels, but in the end you end up with high blood sugar. I think the same thing is true for depression. There can be many defects in many pathways in the brain and overall body functioning that can ultimately express itself as depression. And I'm going to show you some of them. I don't expect you to remember all of these little details, but I just want you to begin to get some range of what the possibilities are, what people are looking at, because it'll dictate treatment in the future. So it is true to say that it is a heterogeneous disorder, and it involves a lot of interplay. Neurotransmitters in the brain are part of it. Receptor responses and regulation are part of it in the brain. And then also the patient's own sensitivities to those neurotransmitters and how they function within the body. So there can be problems with the amounts of neurotransmitters. There can be problems with how they interact with receptors. There can be problems with receptor functioning after the receptor has bound with the neurotransmitter. And then there can be changes and variances in how people actually respond to all of that, their own capacity to deal with stresses, physical and psychological stresses. So there's a lot of research going on right now to try to figure out what are the biomarkers they're using neuroimaging of the brain, that SPECT we were talking about. They're looking at genotyping and to get some better picture of who responds to what and why. I know, Amy, you have been involved in clinical research. One of the big questions that, just for the class at large, one of the big things that almost every study includes right now is, can we take your blood for genetic typing of some sort? That used to not be the case. I remember when nobody did that. Now everybody does that. And you check a little box and they can hold your samples for whatever length of time, and as they figure out more and more things about genetics and genes, you're part of the pool of information. So they're doing the same thing in depression, trying to figure out, can they genotype it? Can they find a genetic marker so that we would say you're more likely to respond to SSRIs like this, or you're more likely that?
The place I did trials at, we also did CNS studies, but I didn't really help out with the depression that much. But one of them we did was just genetics and depression. And we actually were able to give the results back to patients to show them what they would be more susceptible to. And it was cool.
And there is much better genetic information now than there was even 5 and 10 years ago. We still just haven't turned it all into therapeutic approaches or how to prevent or things like that, but we can say you're more likely. Okay. There's three slides in a row that are tables, so don't panic. Okay. I'm not going to expect you to remember any of these, but I wanted to show you something, so just chill. It's good stuff to have in the background. So there's all these various hypotheses, the neurobiological hypothesis for having major depressive disorder. So first with genetic vulnerability, okay, that's one they're looking at, are certain people, and the evidence is that from twin studies that 30 to 40% of major depressive disorder risk is genetic. So we do know that, but they don't have any specific gene markers to prove it out. Another theory that's been looked at for a long time deals with the HPA axis. Y'all just got done with hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis has been looked at a lot because that's where all your cortisol operates from, and that is a stress response hormone, and it can help you adapt to stress. There's all kinds of theories about what that does, in a person's body over time, and do you have capacity to deal with stress or not? And you have lots and lots of stress and lots of cortisol. Does that change your brain in some way? And there's beginning to be beliefs that being subjected to stress for a long time may actually cause physical changes in the brain that then make you more prone to things as time goes by, including depression. Deficiency of monoamines is another one. You know, I'm sure y'all have heard the word monoamine oxidase inhibitor somewhere. It's one of the drug interaction drugs that kind of shows up a lot. But the monoamines are things like norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine, serotonin. Those are all monoamines, and they're neurotransmitters, and they are metabolized out of the body by monoamine oxidases. That's out there. So there's some people who say there's deficiency of monoamines, like you don't have enough serotonin, you don't have enough norepinephrine in your brain, and there's just a genetic tendency to not have enough, and that makes you prone to depression. Okay. Yep, got those. Dysfunction of specific brain regions. They think there's some brain regions that actually fail over time that can produce, that cause the depression. And they've actually shown that stimulating certain parts of the brain actually has an antidepressant effect. But the studies are not consistent in the same parts of the brain or even in the populations that they're working with. So it's an interesting avenue that hadn't been figured out yet. Neurotoxic and neurotrophic processes. What they're looking at here is that there is believed to be of neurotoxic, like there's some chemicals the brain release that might actually, under stress, that might actually decrease parts of the brain's functioning. I think the hippocampus is one area that can be deteriorated over time that makes a person more prone to depression. And then there's some other chemicals released that can actually build up nerves and keep them buffered against the deterioration over time that may be deficient in some people. GABA, some people think it's reduced GABAergic activity. Maybe dysregulation of glutamate system, another area that's very important to almost all neurochemical function in the brain. Impaired circadian rhythm. Some people think if you mess up somebody's circadian rhythm, then that can actually cause depression. We know, you know, seasonal affective disorder, okay, Ashley's from Minnesota, you probably see it a lot more. I have several friends in Minnesota that have seasonal affective disorder, so they have lights in their office and stuff. And so in the northern climes, there are some people, when they have less and less sunlight, their pineal gland does not release the same level of hormone. They end up getting depressed. So if you keep light out there, they do better. But there's some belief that if you destroy a person's circadian rhythm, you can make them prone to depression. And so there's research about what's proper sleep, what is proper sleep for all people, what happens if you sleep deprive somebody, what does that do long term? I don't know. So there's lots of different avenues exploring it, but clearly nothing definitive. Now let me show you some stuff about neurotransmitters and mood, because in the end, the treatments right now all spin around using drugs, and all these drugs affect neurotransmitters in the brain, and that's the biggest way that we treat right now, though we still don't know all of what's going on. So let me give you the biogenic amine hypothesis. Have you ever heard that before? Yep, you have. Boom, shaking her head, yes. Okay, good, no, good. Thank you. I just need some cues out there. Okay, where did you hear it, Boomy?
In undergrad.
Undergrad talked about the biogenic amine. Well, what they're saying is that depression is caused by deficiencies of monoamines, those little neurotransmitters, and so especially norepinephrine and serotonin, that if you do not have enough norepinephrine or enough serotonin in your brain, that you'll be prone to depression. Okay, those two hormones, serotonin and norepinephrine, are believed to be the mood-regulating neurotransmitters, that they operate in the centers of the brain that regulate being high, being low, that type of thing, and your behavior that attaches to that. If you block the degradation of these neurotransmitters, like this norepinephrine and serotonin, by blocking the action of monoamine oxidase that metabolizes them out, or you block their reuptake back into the neuron, that they will stay out in the areas where they're supposed to operate longer. They stay in the synapses longer and have greater opportunity to interact with their receptors and maybe give you more serotonin activity and more norepinephrine activity. And if you can do any of those things, then you may be able to make a person do better if they have depression. Now, the permissive hypothesis states, this is a little more complex about those two, that the control of emotional behavior is a balance between norepinephrine and serotonin in the brain, okay, that it's the balance. Not just that they need to be in sufficient amount, but the balance. It postulates that serotonin is the regulator of brain levels of norepinephrine, so that serotonin is very important. If you don't have proper serotonin, you cannot regulate norepinephrine levels in the brain. Low levels of serotonin permit abnormal levels of norepinephrine to cause depression or mania. So serotonin is like the regulator neurotransmitter. When it's in proper amounts, it can control high and low amounts of norepinephrine. When serotonin is gone, norepinephrine is kind of on its own. And if it gets high or it gets low, you may have mania on the high end and depression if it runs on the low side. That's a theory. Okay, if serotonin cannot control norepinephrine and norepinephrine falls to abnormally low levels, you get depression. If the level of serotonin falls and the level of norepinephrine becomes abnormally high, you may have mania. Antidepressant drugs are effective to the degree that they reinstate the ability of serotonin to control norepinephrine, thus restoring the critical balance. So serotonin is the one that we see work with a lot, and serotonin selective reuptake inhibitors that make high levels of serotonin in the synapse are the #1 drug of choice for treating depression. And you'll hear more about this from Dr. Latassi tomorrow, but you have to understand that pathophysiologically serotonin is important. How it works, I've given you a couple of theories. Does it hold true for everybody? Probably not, because the disease is heterogeneous anyway, but it does make a big difference for a lot of people. Okay, I just wanted you to have some understanding of why we do what we do in treatment, because so often you get treatments just thrown at you, but if you don't understand what they're supposed to be doing, I think it's hard to remember what they are. To me, I have to kind of understand, what is this drug doing to make this better? If I have that, then I can remember it and hold on to it. Okay, major depressive disorder. Okay, here's the DS5 diagnostic criteria. So this is your first introduction into how they use these criteria. And this is the way most of the diseases are spelled out. You have to have at least 5 of the following symptoms, and I'm going to show them to you in a second. And they must have been present. That's most is a must have been present during the same 2-week period, and it has to represent a change from the person's previous functioning. So you have to have 5 symptoms over the same 2-week period, and it has to be a change from the way they have functioned. And one of the symptoms, at least, has to be depressed mood or loss of pleasure or interest. What's the word for loss of pleasure or interest? Anhedonia. They have to either have anhedonia or depressed mood. Okay, so you can have depressed mood or anhedonia. You can't enjoy anything. You've been that way for 2 weeks, or I have a depressed mood, been that way for 2 weeks, and then you have to pick up 4 other symptoms off the list I'm getting ready to show to you. And note, do not include symptoms that are clearly attributable to another medical condition, because there are some medical conditions that can cause some symptomatology, which would not therefore make it depression. Okay, here's your symptom list. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Depressed mood, diminished interest or pleasure, I'll put at the top. So you've got to have one of those. Then you have to have 4 others off this list. Significant weight loss or gain, can be either way. Insomnia or hypersomnia, can't sleep, sleep all the time. Psychomotor agitation or retardation. And doesn't it seem bizarre? They're complete opposites on opposite ends, but they're extremes of these body functions. Fatigue or loss of energy, feelings of worthlessness or inappropriate guilt, diminished ability to think or concentrate or indecisiveness. That's why people with other medical problems do not do well who have depression. They cannot make a decision, they can't concentrate, they can't stay on the game, they can't call the ball game. Diabetes example, you have to make a lot of decisions every day, and they can't do that as well. Then recurrent thoughts of death, suicidal ideation without a specific plan, suicide attempt, or a specific plan for suicide. So if you can get either depressed mood or diminished interest, and you can get 4 others, and that's happened for 2 weeks, and that's a change from the way they were, then that's depression. That's major depressive disorder. Okay, the symptoms have to cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning, and the symptoms are not due to the direct physiologic effects of a substance or another medical condition. So you can't be an alcoholic and have problems, or take methamphetamine and have problems and call that major depression. That would be substance abuse, methamphetamine, whatever, it'd be another category. So you're always ruling out everything that you can rule out, so that when you have these symptoms left over, they simply are the result of nothing else other than likely brain dysfunction of some sort. Okay. The symptoms are not accounted for by bereavement. Okay, somebody dies and people have grief, but that's not major depressive disorder. The symptoms are not better explained by schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, schizophreniform delusion, or other psychotic disorders. Those we'll be looking at later in the week, but they're not part of that cluster of symptoms. And there has never been a manic or hypomanic episode. I underlined it and put in bold print because if you have all of these symptoms, otherwise unexplained by other stuff, and you've had a hypomanic or manic episode, you're bipolar. Okay, so that's a huge thing. If you have mania or hypomania, you're looking at a bipolar disorder of some sort. So when you're trying to diagnose major depressive disorder, you have to rule out the mania thing. And we're going to talk more about how that's a problem. It's not going to be as easy as it sounds right now, but don't forget, when you're trying to do major depressive disorder diagnosis, cannot forget about mania. Okay, it's kind of slippery how it shows up in people's lives over time. Okay, so that's where we are. Okay, let me give you a video clip. This is about 4 minutes of a person, I think he's from England. It's like the British Isles had all the best clips. But he's going to talk to you about what it's like to have depression, and it's really kind of an interesting one. I thought it was a pretty good example of how it feels to have it.
The year of 2010, I will never forget. I was hit hard with depression. It's like it was just there, just looking at me. Constantly hospitalized, sick mentally and physically, an overwhelming feeling of nothingness just came over me. Sleepless nights, eating habits change. You become distant from everyone and everything. Constant stress, tiredness all the time. Thoughts of just leaving it all behind. Rapidly, I lost weight. I was passing out from exhaustion almost every day, taken away in ambulances, hospitalised, to try and determine the main cause of what is going on with me. Family nor friends could understand. I had no one to go to. Fighting it is the hardest part. You cannot begin to explain what it's like to see your mother crying, that strong person in your life just breaking down, and seeing your best friend in tears. It's just hard to deal with. I had so much that I wanted to achieve in life, but I just had no motivation left. I started to do a lot of bad things, hang around with a lot of bad people, make a lot of bad choices. I just wasn't me. I was the sensitive kid. I wasn't as tough as the other people around. It was very easy for me to break down. No one could understand the pain that I was going through. So I thought, what's the point? I'm not getting anywhere in life. I needed change in my life, a new start. I needed to find myself. So what I eventually did was I got help, and calling Beyond Blue was the best thing that I could have ever done, because if it wasn't for them, then I'd still be less than Jar. You are not alone. We believe in you. You'll never know how easy it is to go and tell your loved ones, go and tell your friends, and you'll be surprised just how much they will love you and care for you and support you through this. But it's important that you believe in yourself, okay, and not to let anyone else drag you down, okay, because you are good enough. You gotta get up and you gotta keep going, okay, and don't let anything else drag you down.
Something he said was kind of interesting in there. He said he started hanging out with wrong people doing bad things. You will find a lot of people in the criminal justice system who actually have undiagnosed mental disorders. And I'm not talking about just schizophrenia, mania. You know, people going out and doing bad things because they're all hyper expansive and irritable and attacking and impulsive. But also are having major depressive disorders or other types of mental problems at the time, and then they find themselves within the criminal justice system, which may not be able to actually respond to what they need. So it's kind of a slippery slope. You want to keep people, you want people treated who can get treatment. You want to be able to identify, because if you don't, and they are left to their own path in life, then bad things can happen, and then you can't undo the bad things while you're trying to fix the things that were broken in the first place. So I'm not trying to be a public service commercial. I'm just trying to say that the consequences are really, they can be quite consequential and quite serious if you don't pick things up in people and actually notice, you know, some of this stuff. Okay, let's look at grief versus major depressive episode, because this is one of the biggest things I think that people mess up with in primary care practice, and that is actually calling depression. Sometimes they overcall things, they're just grief. And let's just look at what they are. Affect in grief versus major depression. In grief, the predominant affect is feelings of emptiness and loss. If somebody has died, you have had a big loss. In depression, the predominant feeling is persistent depressed mood and the inability to anticipate happiness or pleasure. It's different than emptiness and loss. It's an inability to experience things in a positive way. Dysphoria. The dysphoria in guilt is likely to decrease in intensity over days to weeks, and it occurs in waves. If any of you have lost somebody very close to you, you know that there's just times where it's really intense, and then times where it's kind of okay, and then it kind of gets intense again. So it kind of runs that kind of a pathway. The pain of grief may be accompanied by positive emotions and humor that are uncharacteristic of pervasive unhappiness. So you can still laugh and have fun, but then you remember, and then the loss is back again. Whereas when you have depression, you're just always there. You're just in the hole all the time. So there's pervasive unhappiness and misery, which are more major depressive episode, and I use MDE for that, and you'll see that a lot in the cycle. Thought content, if you look at thought content in grief versus thought content in depression, in grief, the thought content is usually preoccupied with thoughts and memories of the deceased, remembering things you did, remembering what they did, remembering what you liked, rather than in a major depressive episode, it tends to be self-critical and pessimistic about self. So You're in grief, your thought is about the person and what they did. When you're in depression, the thoughts are about you and they're bad thoughts about you. So it's a fine distinction, but it's still there. Self-worth in grief, self-esteem is generally preserved. You don't feel less worth something. You feel like you've lost something, but you're not less worthy. Depressed people are worthless, no count, don't deserve any good thing to happen. You can't talk to me. You can try to pep people up who are depressed. You aren't going to do it. Self-derogatory ideation. If self-derogatory ideation is present in grief, if you're doing anything against self, it usually involves things that you did that were failings toward the person who you lost, who died. So didn't go visit them, didn't say I love you, didn't do things. So the self-derogation is about what you did in relationship to the person who has died. Thoughts about death. If the bereaved individual thinks about death and dying, the thoughts are generally focused on the deceased and possibly about joining the deceased. You've heard that if you ever talk to people who lost me, they're talking about I'll be okay when I go because then we can be together again, that type thing. Whereas in major depressive episode, the thoughts are focused on ending one's own life because of feeling worthless. It isn't to go join somebody, it's to end your life because you aren't worth anything. And you don't need to join anybody, you just need to become non-existent. You remember how he said, I just felt like nothing, I mean, just like it just kind of descended on him. Well, that's how they are. Okay. One atypical presentation just to throw out there. You got the typical, you got the mood disorder, the inability to have pleasure, and the 4 other symptoms for 2 weeks plus to make a major depressive episode. Sometimes people may not initially come in with a complaint of low mood or other typical symptoms. They will have anhedonia or they will have a low mood, but maybe it'll be unable to have pleasure, but you don't get that darker feeling. They just don't have the ability to be excited, but they may not look depressed on the surface per se. And they have a lot of somatic complaints. They're tired all the time, they have headaches, abdominal pain, weight changes. It's all the physical things. There must be cancer, something going on with me. The patient may also appear to be more irritable or angry. When you see irritable and kind of not caring about what happens to you, and kind of angry, kind of not caring what goes on with you, it's kind of unusual for that personality type. Think depression. It's more common seen in children and adolescents. When children get depressed, even teenagers get depressed, they're just angry and they're moody and angry and kind of irritable, snappy. And that, it's kind of hard to sort out because teenagers kind of get moody and irritable and snappy anyway. That's just kind of normal. But how off norm is it for that person? How sustained is it? How much is it affecting function? They get depressed, they get moody, snappy, then they start failing tests, they don't go to school. Things like that's beginning to affect proper functioning. Okay, let's look at development in course over time. Onset may occur at any age, but more markedly after puberty. So once a person's gone through puberty and you're like 13, 14, 15, in that range, that's a likely onset for most. The incidence peaks in the 20s, and the course is variable. Some rarely have a remission, and others go years between discrete episodes. So some people have a major depressive episode and then go on 5, 6 years, nothing, then have another one. Some people go down in the hole and stay there for a long, long time. Chronicity of symptoms. The increase is the likelihood of underlying personality disorder, anxiety, and substance use disorder. So if they have symptoms of depression for long stretches of time, you have to think about what else might be going on. Maybe they have a personality disorder, maybe they have anxiety, maybe they have substance use issue. Chronicity of symptoms decreases likelihood that treatment will be followed by full symptom resolution. So the longer somebody's had symptoms, the more likely they are not to respond to treatment. And if they respond to treatment, less likely to be full response. So the longer and the more deeper the symptoms are, the more likely it is that they will not necessarily respond. So those are bad predictors, for long-term treatment. Development in course typically begins with 3 months of onset for 2 and 5 individuals. So for 40% of the people, recovery typically happens over a 3-month period. And in the others, it can be within 1 year for 80%. So what happens to that remaining 20%? They just keep on going on depressed. So you're not looking at 100% treatment. So as a provider, when you start treating people, you do have to hold out the promise of what can happen good. And there's all kinds of things. They can get better, they can be more functional, they can get good. But are you able to sit there and say to every single, and I wouldn't say it to a patient, but you need to know this, are you going to be effective treating 100% of people with depression? Absolutely not. And so that's one reason why providers don't like to look for it sometimes, is because who wants to be failing? It's a harder thing to deal with because you have to know what's a likely outcome and what can I do to get that, so that you have as a provider, you have proper expectations. That is a better, more successful outcome than, well, I want to fix it, and then when you can't fix it, you failed. No, it's the disease. This is kind of the way it runs, and you have to know what it looks like. Features, now recency of onset is a strong determinant of the likelihood of near-term recovery. All the more reason to figure out when people are depressed early rather than late. Usually folks will go around for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, I just haven't been right, okay? They just go on. If you get symptoms and you get treatment fairly soon after those symptoms have started, the chance of getting complete resolution is much better than if you just try to buck up, for a long period of time. Okay, features associated with lower recovery rates, longer duration of the current episode, as I had said, psychotic features, if they hear things, see, if they have hallucinations or delusions, that's not a good predictor. Prominent anxiety, you see a lot of anxiety with depression, that's not a good predictor. Personality disorder is not a good predictor. Symptom severity, you got 9 out of 9 instead of 5 out of 9. The risk of recurrence becomes progressively lower over time as the duration of remission increases. Okay, which kind of makes sense. The longer you go before having symptoms again, the more likely, the risk of recurrence is lower. If you can go a long time in remission, then you may be healed up. The risk of recurrence is higher if there was a preceding severe episode. If you're younger, those who have had multiple episodes in the past, and those with even mild symptoms during remission. There are some who remit. They're not completely cured. They're not completely healed. They may still have a little sleep disturbance, a little anxiety or something, and that's just kind of baseline, never goes away. If they have that all along, then they're more likely to have another episode than not. No difference between the sexes in the clinical symptomatology. So even though women are more likely to have depression than men, when they have it, it looks about the same in terms of course and development over time. No clear effects of age on course or treatment response. So it's not like if you're younger, you can respond better than if you're older. It doesn't really change it. Okay, further development course. Some symptom differences exist. In younger patients, it's more common to see hypersomnia and hyperphagia, which means sleeping a lot more and eating a lot more. So it's more common in younger people to see children who sleep all the time, or teenagers who sleep all the time and who gain weight, eat a lot of food. Melancholic symptoms and psychomotor disturbances are more common in older patients. So that mood disorder is more prominent, and psychomotor disturbance is usually retardation, more blunted movement, don't do as many things. Suicide attempts lessen in middle and late age. The course of the depression does not generally change with aging. So the courses run about the same. Okay, any questions about that? I think we made this whole differential diagnosis off until tomorrow. Just kind of look at it. So I think we've done enough. Y'all have been done to enough for today. So just the one thing I'll ask you to do is just go over, just get your words down, get your terminology down, and then that will help you as you have different psychiatric disorders kind of presented to you, because they will be presented in the terms that we covered earlier. So I know it's a lot of junk. I know it's a lot, but just stay with me. It's going to get better. Okay. See you all tomorrow.